Throughout my life, I've always loved healthy obsessions. By that I mean new things to learn, new venues to explore, new communities to be a part of, ways of hitting the reset button and starting from scratch. I love that feeling of discovering a new concept, a new thought process, a new principle, a new technique that starts me over from scratch and allows me the opportunity to be able to revisit everything I've ever known with this new nuance, this new seasoning, and this new flavor. And that can very often change everything for me. I love the idea of reinterpreting my reality. And now that I'm approaching 50 years old, I'm 47, I realize now that I'm really at the beginning of my journey, learning new things like calligraphy, learning about philosophy ambitiously for the first time in my life, learning about literature, learning about visual storytelling in ways I never have in the past. It's an exciting journey, and one which will only help enhance and enrich the stories that I'm sharing with you moving forward, and my own experiences and my own interpretations of them. And throughout this process, I have discovered and then rediscovered certain aspects of my personality, certain aspects of what I realized was a philosophy. I never considered myself philosophical. Now I realize my entire life is a philosophy that through the test of time, through the test of experience, has come back from over and over since the ages of 8, through my 20s, through my 30s, through my 40s, and soon to be through my 50s. And it is something that I have made reference to multiple times. The knowledge of self, that which I got tattooed right over here on my arm, right? Know thyself. I can't stress enough how much that already what was important understanding about life has only grown over time and through experience to be so much more important than I originally thought. It was a seed that was planted in my consciousness early on in my life, through good and bad, through all of these different experiences in my life, that culminated into a life philosophy that serves me time and time again. And what's really interesting is, despite everything I share, and despite all of these different smart, wise, virtuous people that I've followed and listened to and have served as my role models over the years, I realize over and over again that regardless of how rich and how thoughtful and how researched the conclusions, the beliefs, the structures and the politics that other people might run their own lives by, in the end, it comes down to me and my own feelings and my own interpretations. The reason I'm bringing this up right now in today's Art Talk, and the reason why I want to do this talking head videos is because, as opposed to doing just a time-lapsed painting, is because it's important. And when it's something that's important, I want to make eye contact with you. I want to talk to you. I don't want just to be the voice that you're listening to, but I want to be the person that you're listening to, because this is very personal to me. And I'm sharing this story one-on-one with you. Understand that in sharing this with you, I have a very profound feeling of moral seriousness. In real life, when I'm goofing off and I'm doing my own thing, I'm a goof. I love funny shit. I love being silly. But I know that when it comes down to these art talks, this is a very different facet of my personality. This is the teacher that's talking to you. This is the caretaker that's talking to you. This is the parent that's talking to you. Not to imply that I'm your parent, but to mean that I take your well-being very much into account. What prompted me? What led me to making today's video? What was the catalyst that made me go, I need to talk about this today? Well, it's actually multiple things that led to a final message I received from somebody that made me think to myself, I need to talk about this. I have spoken to and have worked with and have had consultations with and have shared wisdom back and forth with, at this point in my life, tens of thousands of artists. Through college, through teaching in colleges, to teaching different courses, to my school online, to the consultations that I have with students, to the weekly classes that I have with students. I've had the chance to share some very personal and very impactful conversations both ways with artists from every different walk of life. Artists who signed up for my mentorship and said, Adam, I've never drawn a day in my life. I'm 17 years old. I love art. I've been drawing all through elementary school and I'm finishing high school soon and I want to get a good start. And I've never taken a professional class in my life. I'm starting from scratch. 2, artists that have worked for Wizards of the Coast, and artists that have worked for Fantasy Flight Games and have worked on big feature films. And some of my artists have worked for Kojima and worked on the Metal Gear series. I mean, we're talking about the whole range, the whole gamut of artists. I've spoken to illustrators that had very unique and personal styles of art, to artists that have worked in galleries, to artists that were looking to do video game art and design, who wanted to work in films, and every little nuance in between. And there's one commonality that ties us all together: our individuality. And this week in particular has been very moving to me. It's been very impactful. And it's a week that really reminded me to take what I see very, very seriously, particularly when I'm sharing it with you. It's one thing for me to have my own philosophy, those things that have worked for me, but I have to take into account, I have to take the responsibility that every single time I share something with you, that what I say actually matters. Because it's very easy to take ourselves for granted. It's very easy to take our opinions for granted, which is kind of a segue into what I want to talk about today. So when I say these things, I'm saying so being thoughtful of many different angles of what it is that I'm sharing with you, because I recognize the fact that what works for me might not work for you. So for me to turn to you and say, if you want to be successful, if you want to be productive, if you want to get out of that rut, if you want to overcome your personal issues, maybe you've got learning challenges like autism or ADHD. Maybe you're somebody who's just been through some seriously heavy shit in your life and you're really burnt out. Maybe you're somebody who's been grinding through life for the last 2 decades, 3 decades, trying to make a name for yourself and trying to succeed, and just getting rejection after rejection after rejection, and you're finding yourself at your wit's end. Or maybe you're somebody who is a seasoned professional who's confused on the direction where you want to go with your life because certain physical issues got in the way, like carpal tunnel syndrome. Despite the fact that you worked for a company like Wizards, working on Magic the Gathering, you had to give that up because of the physical issues that it started, that overwork and working those joints and working those nerves ended up causing to you. And you find yourself at a point now where you're you've established yourself, you've climbed the ladder, you've made it somewhere, and now you're forced to start over from scratch. That could be really tough, right? Or an email that I received recently from somebody who shall remain anonymous, to protect her privacy, of course, but sent me an email that I just read this morning that was the straw that broke the camel's back for me, with regards to deciding to make this video. And she wrote to me, and I'm paraphrasing here, but in other words, described to me how she's been through hell. She has a loved one that was a very meaningful member of her life who was always there, who she lost in a very challenging way. And she's been through a roller coaster of emotion. She's been through a roller coaster of difficulty and challenge. And she wrote me for the simple purpose of just thanking me for my videos and thanking me for the messages that I share, and that it helped to pull her through a bit of a dark place. And listening to her and listening to her express herself and thanking me despite what she'd been through reminded me that as a YouTuber and influencer, which is the most insulting thing you could possibly call me. I mean, I don't consider myself, I don't want to consider myself an influencer. I'm not somebody who is telling you what I think is best. I'm somebody who's doing actually quite the opposite once we get into it. That in this moment of no bullshit emotion, when life hit her with something very, very real, something that an influencer would be very unappreciated for getting their nose involved in, that she reached she went out of her way to thank me for that, for my videos, because it brought her some clarity. It brought her some balance, and it helped to offer her some comfort and comfort while she spent all of these months trying to overcome a really big loss in her life. Why does that matter to me so much? It's because when I've been at my darkest, when I've been at my least confident, when I've been that artist who feels like he's past his prime and who is finding himself on the unemployment block yet again, trying to stretch out his unemployment insurance as far as he can go, who's got bill collectors that are chasing after him and all that kind of crap, and feeling like an irresponsible, immature Peter Pan syndrome loser, despite all of the tireless work that I put into building my career and having absolutely no sense of direction, or being somebody who's been through some of the hardest personal heartbreaks and relationship challenges and having my entire life and my sense of being uprooted and finding myself hitting rock bottom. What has brought me back to balance over the long term has been my trust in myself, learning to trust myself. And I can't stress enough how challenging this can be for me and for so many people out there to find positivity, to find a sense of comfort, to find a sense of purpose in life, when everything you've done, or at least where it feels like everything you've done, every decision you've made in your life has led you to hardship. It's led you to failure. It's led you to self-doubt. It's led you to compare yourself to other people who might be half your age, who have twice your success. And it's easy to look at your own work, your own achievements, your own accomplishments, your own skill, and say, maybe I've been lying to myself all these years. I had that conversation with a student this week who is probably one of the most gifted artists I've seen in a long time. In fact, I've had this conversation, and I would argue that some of the most talented artists I've seen, including a lot of artists that you are probably a big fan of. I've had a lot of private conversations with a lot of these artists that are role models to other artists out there that have shared that same feeling with me. This imposter syndrome, this lack of direction, this fear, this insecurity, this doubt whether or not they've followed the right path. And when you're in your hardest point, as this woman who reached out to me was, and as this student that was closer to my age, not a student, but this artist that was closer to my age, to students that were brand new, the same problem applied, the same obstacle applied. Embracing one's sense of self, having faith in oneself, that who you are is enough. It's sufficient. It'll get you by. You will find success. And furthermore, once you get it, once that clicks in your brain, once you look in the mirror and you don't see this ugly, fat, stupid, talentless, bad-skinned cellulite, ugly ass makeup, small chinned, excuse for a human being. And instead you look in the mirror and you see a human being that has a heart and a soul and the gift of life and the gift of imagination and the gift of compassion and the gift of empathy, and that you have the gift of sight and the gift of touch and the gift of love and the gift of all of your senses. And you have the gift of a human body that is a product of hundreds of millions of years of evolution that has slowly but surely churned itself and adapted itself and improved itself into becoming this masterpiece called a human. When you look at it from that perspective, you look in that mirror and you don't see somebody who won't get as many clicks as that other person if you post selfies of yourself on Instagram. And instead you look in the mirror and you see a masterpiece. Ask yourself the question, what does this masterpiece sound like? What does your voice sound like? Is it high-pitched and whiny? Is it a bit nasal? Is it deep and rich? Is it a bit too masculine to fit onto a woman's body? Is it a bit too feminine to fit onto a man's body? What about, how has your voice, how has your dialect evolved over the years to express itself in the way that you do? Why do you use the words that you do? What movies, what friends have you had? What jokes did you share with your friends in high school? What childhood role model has influenced and helped to fashion the person that you are today? Most importantly, what have you remained when the test of time has passed? There are many trends that have come and gone. There are many fashion ideas, some which I'm not going to share with you because you'd laugh your ass off if I shared some of the stupid fashion ideas I had growing up. Not going there today. Maybe one day. Maybe if you pay me enough, I might think about it. But what has stood the test of time when those trends have come and gone, and there's certain facets of your personality, of your voice, of your body, of your fashion, of your style, of your aesthetic, of your form of expression that remains today? That might have come to light, might have come to fruition at a very early time in your life, maybe when you were 6, 7, 8 years old. Who knows? And look at that person today and say, who's still there? Because when all is lost, when you shed all of that interpretation of self, when you shed all of that belief of self, and you look at for yourself for who you are, who have you always been, whether you like it or not? And when you find that version of yourself, then all of a sudden life starts to make sense. But you'll only be able to take advantage of that if you realize that everything that you are, everything that you have, everything that you've become is a gift. It's not a curse, it's a gift. There's a reason why when we hear ourselves in a recording, as I'm recording my voice into a microphone right now, why we cringe. Because we don't like seeing ourselves. We don't like hearing ourselves from the outside. We're not used to the sound of our own voice. In fact, you can't hear yourself and listen to yourself simultaneously. Did you know that? It's actually mentally not possible. Try to listen to yourself while you're hearing yourself. It's kind of an interesting concept. Well, this is something that I get the privilege of doing all the time. I've gotten used to the sound of my own voice, but let me tell you, it wasn't easy to do. Hearing myself in a recording these art talks, if you listen to my earliest videos on YouTube, which go back probably like between 10 and 12 years ago, when I was recording things on a headset, I remember profoundly listening to those color psychology videos or those painting videos that I had done, and absolutely cringing at the sound of my own voice. I couldn't stand it. I couldn't stand hearing myself, but I forced myself through it. And over the years, you just get used to it. After a while, you don't notice anymore. I don't care about standing in front of the camera. I can be completely myself in front of a camera right now. It doesn't bother me at all, but it took me a long time to get over that. And when I did, when I managed to get over that obstacle, it took me years, it took me some time to slowly chip through my ego and slowly start to discover who am I in my most natural form. And the more I did that, and the more I started to make decisions based off of this lack of judgment of self, but rather an acceptance of self, that all of the decisions that I started making in my life started to become synergistic with how I expressed it myself. And I can't express enough how important this is for us as artists, not only in what we express, but how we express it. And not only in how we express it, but the method at which we use to express it. From the career choice that we have, to the rhythm at which we work, to the way that we execute that finished product, it becomes its greatest achievement when it is the purest manifestation of who you are as a person, all bells and whistles aside. In fact, the more you embrace this, the more you realize that it is the bells and whistles, the bedazzle, this presentation of self is a distraction from the most beautiful version of who you are. You know, here's a good example. Remy Wolf. I don't know if you're familiar with Remy Wolf. My daughter, Emily, is a huge fan, and she got me into her. And she posted a video recently, her latest video. I think it's called Premonition. I can't, it's funny, I don't remember the name, but I've literally listened to it on repeat for the last 2 weeks. It is one of the greatest songs I've ever heard. And I listened to it. I didn't see the video, I was just listening to it. And you know, I've been a huge fan of Remy Wolf for two reasons. One, it reminds me of my daughter, so she gets brownie points for that. But also just because she's just an incredible voice, and her band and the music and oh God, she just keeps getting better over time. Incredible. And I saw the video. After weeks of listening to her, I saw the video for the first time. And big bouncy boobs with no bra on, and she's got this absolutely unapologetic exposure of self, right? She's a girl, she's got a little bit of meat on her bones, and she's not wearing a bra. So guaranteed, when I looked down at the comments in the video, I knew, like we all know, that the number one comment right down the line of the video, if it wasn't from somebody who was just a fan of her stuff, which is more often than not women who could overlook the novelty of breasts and just see her and just listen to her, who she was, were completely loving her song. It was one of the best songs she's ever written, or her band has at least. That every other comment was, wear a bra, nice tits, blah, 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 blah. The only thing anybody could focus on was her boobs. And you know what? She knows. And what I love about her is she didn't give a shit. She didn't care. In fact, if anything, what I love about what she's done is she's so talented. She's so gifted. She's so good at what she does that she's challenging you to listen to her, isn't she? Because, I mean, I won't do it, but imagine I'm standing there with these little tight Borat, suspenders on, like I pull my bathing suit over my shoulders and it's giving me a camel toe type of thing, right? And people are going, dude, what, put some pants on or something. What's wrong with you? But what if I was doing that, but I'm not saying that she looks cringy. Borat's cringy. She's not cringy at all. But what if I did that? I know that every single comment would be commenting about my junk, right? And my absolute poor sense of taste. But what if my voice was brilliant? Why is Sacha Baron Cohen such a celebrated comedian, despite the fact that he's done such ridiculously cringy things by modern standards? It's because he's challenging your beliefs. He is forcing you to accept him. Why did Jim Carrey be the funniest human being on earth, and still the funniest human being on earth? Why has he gotten so damn serious all of a sudden? Why is he going off acting all woke and like going on talking about how we don't exist? And is he having a nervous breakdown? Yeah, maybe. It's a lot of pressure to be to be who he is. But I don't see it that way. I see him as being somebody who says, hey, 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 take the mask off. I'm not Jim. Jim Carrey's a character. He's a fictional character. It's me talking to you. Look at me. Stop drooling. Stop Googling. Stop freaking out when you're looking at me. I'm just another human being. I cracked some jokes. Good. Get out of your system. Who am I? Talk to me. I'm not sitting here trying to make you. I'm not trying to make you giggle. I'm not a clown. I'm a human being. Pay attention to me. I'm here. And Remy Wolf is doing the same thing. She's saying, hey, I'm here. Listen to me. Did that cause a reaction? Of course it did, because we are very seduced by imagery. We're very conditioned by society. We're very conditioned by the thoughts and beliefs of others. We are community-oriented people. So if somebody like Remy does something like that, we're going to react. We're going to, oh, she's got big boobs and she's wearing a tight t-shirt. I can't even, and the lighting is hitting from straight on top, so it really accentuates that. She was making a point in that video. And what she's saying is, but you know what? If I'm going to be the most authentic version of myself, if I'm going to express myself the most authentic way, if I'm going to be me, if you want me, this is who I am. Big bouncy boobs and all, deal with it. That's life, man. And you're going to deal with my weight, and you're going to deal with my curly hair, and you're going to deal with my big cheeks, and you're going to deal with all of this shit. You're going to deal with who I am, but I'm being the most authentic version of myself. And it forced everybody to use their ears and their heart more. Because in order to love her, you have to accept her for who she is. And, well, most people do. There's a reason why her song is such a huge hit. It's not easy to do that. It's not easy to be yourself, particularly to the level at which Remy presented herself, to the level at which Jim Carrey did. But Jim Carrey wouldn't get to where he is today unless he accepted himself for who he was, unless he truly saw Jim looking back at him in the mirror. He had to look in the mirror and see himself. He had to find himself. How does this translate into you? Well, I can say with utmost confidence, after speaking with and sharing conversations and months and personal stories with literally tens of thousands of fellow artists, it is extremely clear that this is one of the biggest obstacles that we face. And the way that this manifests itself in a career, for instance, is being seduced by the great job, by looking outside of ourselves at what the industry is doing, what's getting those jobs, so you believe, what's getting people into those big prestigious positions where they're getting a lot of fame and popularity, and thinking to myself, well, that's the safest route for me to go if I'm going to find success. It makes sense, right? If an artist who's worked at Magic the Gathering is telling you what to draw, and then some other artist who's also very good, but he hasn't worked at Magic the Gathering is telling you what to do, who are you going to listen to first? Probably the one who got the job, right? It makes sense. We as human beings have a survival instinct. We don't want to rattle cages. We don't want to stand out. We don't want to be an anomaly. We want to fit in. So when we step outside of line, we're doing so at a risk. And that risk, although the risk of trying out an artistic style is in no way dangerous to us, on a survival level, we're taking an existential risk. We're taking a risk that we could be ostracized, we could be rejected, we could be denied the support from our community, support from the person who's holding our paycheck hostage. And they'll only give us that paycheck unless we please them in the way that they want us to. And as time has passed and as we become more industrialized, or at least we have been industrialized over the years, studio work, which has much more of a political and corporate and money focused management of artists than the traditional illustrator or fine artist that we've been over the years, it has offered us a type of financial and professional stability and security that most artists wouldn't have in the past. This is one of the reasons why a lot of artists ended up becoming lawyers and accountants and programmers and doing things that were a lot more safe, a lot more needed in society. And that actually is quite tempting. So somebody who's worked in a studio like that, or somebody's worked in a game studio, or somebody's worked for an art studio that has gotten them long-term work and has gotten them a lot of fame and repute, then they're the safer bet. But that's wrong for 99% of us. That's a wrong path, and I know this from experience. I don't only know this from myself, but I know this from artists who have worked at Magic the Gathering who can't do that anymore. I've heard this from artists who have incredible skill, but still struggle to find consistent work. What is the common denominator between all of these people? It's the fact that they did what they could, but they didn't do what they should. As I quote Jeff Cavalier saying from Athlete Next Year, he says, are you lifting what you can, or are you lifting what you should? When he's talking about weight training, about weightlifting. The same thing applies to our career. I spent the first decade and a half of my career, as I shared that story with a very similarly aged and similar career path and life path as mine artist this week did. I spent well over a decade and a half chasing after the needs and desires of others. I valued their opinion over my own because they were where I thought I wanted to be. And I did so at the expense of my own sense of self. I was so seduced by what the industry wanted of me, that every quality that made me good, every quality that made me valuable, every quality that made me unique as an artist, I completely put on the back burner. I let it go. I didn't value it. I thought they're the ones that are doing what I want to do, so I'm going to do my best to please them and show them that I fit into the crowd. And 9 times out of 10, I didn't. Just like the call I had this week with that artist. He told me that he was at a breaking point. He told me that he was tired of reinventing himself, of rebranding himself, of starting over from scratch over and over and over again. And had I not had the experience that I had, and had I not been the age that I was, and had I not had the opportunity to speak to as many artists as I did, listening to him and looking at his artwork, I'd have told him to grow the fuck up. Stop being a baby. Look at your work. It's freaking gorgeous. It's beautiful. What you do is, you of all people have zero right to complain. Of all people, you have no right to complain. But I know better. Because what he was expressing to me was the fact that, yes, it might be good, but it's not me. Yes, it might be good, but it's not good enough for that studio, that studio, that studio, and that studio, and that studio. And the other 25 studios I applied to that haven't returned my phone call, obviously. Right? And I know that. I know that from personal experience. And that it brought us back to that personal life experience that I've had, that I share with people constantly. That one constant in my life that has never died, and that is my ability to rely on myself. And the more that I've learned what works for me, the more that I'm in harmony with myself, my imagination, with my hormones, with my diet, with my sleep, with my lifestyle, with the people around me, the more I realize I have so much to express. Recently, when I was talking about my back issues and stuff like that, one of the things I spoke about was the very unpleasant and stressful experience I had with the new doctor that I had, who I felt was very dismissive and even gaslighting me quite a bit. And I walked away from that feeling very, very lost and very stressed. My doctor is in a position of great authority. She has a lot of control over the outcome of my life. She's an obstacle between me and my health. And I was very surprised how stressed I got. It literally kept me up nights worrying about having to face her, having to deal with her, having to find another doctor. And going through that whole process, I waited 4.5 years to get a new doctor. And I really felt bad about our last exchange. And then the subsequent phone calls that she didn't even bother answering the weeks that followed after that. She just completely ignored me. And it was really, really stressful. And I don't like bothering people, but I also have health concerns. I have needs from a health perspective. And for months, 4, 5, 6 months, I was very stressed about getting blood tests, finding out what those blood tests were, and then the subsequent lack of treatment or anti-treatment that I'd get from her. And the night before our meeting, particularly the night before our meeting, because I booked an appointment about a week earlier, I didn't sleep that night. I was so nervous about talking to her. I was so intimidated by the idea of talking to her. I was scared, so much to the point that when I was sitting in the waiting room waiting for her, I had to breathe to try to bring my heart rate down because I was getting heart palpitations from the stress. And I could not, for the life of me, put my finger on why I was having such a strong emotional reaction to her. Why was this so difficult for me? Why was this making me so emotionally vulnerable? I mean, I've only met her once, but I felt like she had I felt I was incredibly vulnerable to whatever it is she had done to me, to the point where I was having an emotional reaction that was completely out of character for me. I'm generally the type of person who can handle himself under stress quite well. Not here. And to me, it seemed like a relatively small situation. And I sat down with her. I sat down in front of her. And I said hi, and she told me the results of my blood test and everything like that. And then she asked me if there's anything else. And at this point, we were being very kind to each other. And I realized that exact moment, as soon as she asked me, that it all of a sudden clicked. What I needed to do to overcome this challenge. And that was, I'm not going to confront her about it. I'm not going to challenge her about it. I'm not going to attack her. I'm not going to get into the ring with my doctor. And all of a sudden it made sense. I had spent my entire life with a very strong influence in my life who is always encouraging me to punch first, attack first, to recognize a threat and be the first to make sure that they don't catch you off guard. And that put me in a very combative headspace, in a very aggressive headspace. It caused me to conspire. It caused me to plan for war, when objectively, no war had happened yet. And what I realized through my experience in the past was that I was putting myself in a situation that was going to create the situation I was most afraid of. By walking into a room with somebody who might have just had a good or bad day, and walking up to them on the attack, they defend. And the moment that they defend, it's a war. It's a battle. And instead, I took the approach that felt the most authentic to me. I suck at battle. I suck at fights. But I'm really good at peace. I'm good at not being aggressive. I suck at aggressiveness. It's not my personality. It's not my style. It doesn't mean that I'm ignorant. Shit, if anything, being raised the way I did taught me, it was to be extremely hyper-aware, hyper-vigilant, which has actually turned out to be a quality and a flaw, depending on the situation. If you want to know what I'm talking about, watch my video with Dr. Charlie Johnson when we talked about physiotherapy. You'll see where hypervigilance can work against you sometimes. But I walked into the ring with her, and I spoke to her through the lens and through the mind of somebody who respected her, which I did. And I think that was the foundation of my conversation. Instead of looking at her and saying, I feel like you gaslit me, and I feel like I can't rely on your help, which is what caused me the anxiety, because now I'm preparing for a backlash. Instead, I said, you're incredibly valuable to me. You're important to me. Your role in my life is extremely, extremely important. I rely on you. I rely on your expertise. I rely on your wisdom. I rely on your compassion. I rely on your attention. You're my doctor. And I want you to know that there were certain things that happened that made me feel afraid, that made me feel scared, that I wasn't going to get the care that I needed. And I was being very vulnerable with you, and I felt like that was dismissed. And let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that was one of the best conversations I ever had. She was compassionate, she was patient, she was understanding. She realized I just wanted the best of our relationship moving forward. And she showed me that side of herself. She showed me that quality in who she was. Not only in the fact in how she addressed my concerns, but how she listened to me in the first place. The very fact that she heard me and listened to me for 15 minutes is a very big gift from a doctor who's got another 400 clients waiting for her that day. Doctors, man, holy shit, they've got a heavy workload. She gave me a great gift that day. She gave me the gift of her thoughtfulness and her attention and her care, and she decided to be extra thorough just to make sure I felt secure in the results that I was reading and all that kind of stuff and the treatment. And we had a newfound respect for each other. And I walked away from that without any anxiety. I walked out with a sense of renewed hope. And I realized that whole time that enemy that I was fighting was within myself. She wasn't an enemy. She was just there being herself. All of that conflict, all of that stress, all of that doubt was all me. It was my interpretation of the situation, and that feeling like in order to handle this situation, in order to succeed in this situation, I had to do so according to the criteria of other people that were a very big influence in my life. People who are older and wiser and more experienced. And what I realized, that advice that was given to me was advice that objectively helped this individual find an exceptional amount of success in a world where success in a domain that she had succeeded in was unheard of. It didn't exist for a young woman her age at the time that she found that success. But I'm not a 23-year-old woman battling against the oppression of a male-dominated industry. I'm not a group leader for hundreds of men, being a single woman and trying to hold my own. I'm a 6'3", 47-year-old male who does not need to prove his strength. What I need to prove is my gentleness. What I need to prove is my self-control. What I need to prove is my compassion. What I need to prove is my patience. What I need to prove is my thoughtfulness and my diplomacy. I don't need to prove. I don't have anybody commenting on my tits. That's not an obstacle for me. My obstacle is what's expected of me as an adult male. And I knew that by me trying to behave like a strong, combative alpha male would have made my life terrible. It would have caused me to make terrible decisions, and it has caused me to make bad decisions in the past. When I did get in the ring and I did complain and I did fight people, not physically, but professionally, that ended up biting me in the ass because it wasn't called for. How does this all come to you? Where do you come into this? Well, when I spoke to that artist, and when I spoke to that more beginner artist at the beginning of the week, and when I received that letter from that person who had been through hell and back and was going out of her way to let me know that my video made a difference for her, the solution to every single one of those problems was embracing your true self. I said to that artist, I said, I see a lot of talent, but does any of that talent belong to you? And he said, no. Some of it does, but most of it, no. Okay. And we sat down and we learned, we analyzed his work, and we figured out how to see who he was. Who are you? What do I see? So I tried to look at his work as objectively as possible. I tried to look at it not through the filter of looking at the art that belongs to a man in his 40s, but instead looking at the art of an artist. If I didn't know who drew it, what was looking back at me? And we interpreted it through that lens, and we had a conversation about that. And as soon as we did that, it became as clear as glass where he needed to go with his art, what kind of career to pursue, because that career should always be a manifestation of you and not what you're trying to prove you are, but the real you with a capital Y. And it made sense. And why did that woman reach out to me and send me that email when she had been through hell and back? Is because despite the fact that she's been through hell, she's still a healer, and she used her suffering to heal me. She used her suffering to make me feel valued, and it reminded me that I matter. It reminded me that I should not take myself for granted. Her integrity helped to shine a light on mine, and it helped to shine a light on my value. And there's nothing more beautiful. That there was nothing more beautiful than that gift she gave me. I'm never going to get rid of that. I printed it, and I'm never getting rid of that letter. It's a keepsake. It's an heirloom, in my opinion. And when it comes to you, the artistic decisions that you make, to the body that you own, to the career that you choose, to all of the above, to everything, every decision that you make, if it's not coming from you, if it's not coming from the most authentic place, you're going to discover eventually that it's time to change. You're going to discover eventually that you need to look deeper and discover a more profound version of yourself, a more profound compassion for yourself, a greater, raw, more authentic interpretation of who you are. And when you do that, a lot of these answers are going to answer themselves. And I don't give a shit if you're 10 years old, and I don't give a shit if you're 7 years old. That lesson is a lesson that's going to follow you through the rest of your life. Okay? With that said, I love you all with all my heart, and happy painting. Take care.